association of scholars who have an interest in West Africa and the diaspora, and our mission is to promote research on West Africa and the diaspora. We are based here at Boston University in the African Studies Center. We've been operating since 1989 when we were founded at Howard University. We encourage all of you, if you have an interest in West Africa and the diaspora, which I assume you do since you're here tonight, to join us. We have membership forms in the back. We have a lot of activities going on throughout the year, and we would welcome having you participate in them. So I think tonight we have a really exciting evening in store. This is, I think, the fourth year that we have been celebrating Black History Month, and I just printed out for a reminder some of the things that we've done in the past. So the first year we did this, in 2013, we had an art exhibit called Windows to West Africa that was actually held in Brookline. The second year, we had a program called Incorporating African History in Black History Month. And I believe one of our speakers, Jemadari Kamara, Professor Jemadari Kamara, was on that panel. And last year, we had an art exhibit called The Other Side of the Lens, African Viewpoints and the Reverse, which were was a photographic exhibition that was at the Strand Theatre in Boston and at the YWCA in Cambridge. And along with those exhibits, we had two panels, an opening panel, Who is African? Reflections on Black and African Identities, and the closing panel, What is African? Representations and Expressions of Africa in the Americas. So tonight's program, Blackness and the Changing Face of the African Diaspora in the U.S., is a continuation of those programs for Black History Month. I'm really, really grateful to our speakers, both of whom are really remarkable scholars, activists, thinkers, and just really wonderful people. It's really, really a pleasure to have both Trina and Wendy here tonight. And we're really looking forward to this very exciting and probably very provocative dialogue. I would also like to thank, of course, our sponsors. We are joined in sponsoring tonight's event by the African American Studies program here at Boston University, the African Studies Center at Boston University, the African Students Organization, and Africans in Boston. And in addition, this program is made possible by a very generous grant from the Boston Cultural Council. And we're very grateful to them for their support of this programming. So I think without any further ado, I would like to introduce the Associate Director of the West African Research Association, who will present our speakers in more detail. Cynthia Eziani has been with the West African Research Association starting this past year, and we're very grateful to have her with us. So, thank you.
Good evening and welcome everybody to this really exciting event. I'm just going to talk a little bit about our speakers and their background. We're very happy to have with us tonight Trina Jackson. She is the program coordinator of the Inclusion Initiative with the Third Sector New England. She supports cross-sector networks in communities of color to address root causes of poverty and economic inequality. She has also been involved for a very long time with the Network of Immigrant and African American Solidarity. So she's very well versed in issues of the changing face of the Black diaspora in the U.S. She's also a writer, a photographer, and a yoga practitioner. Trina is a graduate of Goddard College. And also here with us today is Dr. Wendy Wilson-Fowle. She is Associate Professor and Program Chair of the Africana Studies at Lafayette College in Pennsylvania. Her research engages around issues of sociocultural change, ethnic diversity, identity, and multifocal historical narratives. Her current book is Memories of Madagascar and Slavery in the Black Atlantic. I haven't seen many African researchers who are doing work around Madagascar. Madagascar is like, nobody remembers Madagascar. So that is really great to have someone working on these issues. So our format for tonight is the dialogue, which will be about 30 minutes, and then we're going to have reactions from you all. And we invite you all to be really, to really participate in this conversation and make it, really interactive for all of us. So yes, that's how we're going to run to today's show. Again, don't forget, we're trying to get enough publicity and to get people talking about, diaspora and racial identity. This being Black History Month, so please, if you're a tweeter, tweet with this hashtag tonight. So yes, we're going to start this conversation with a little entry point into the whole issue of the changing face of Black diaspora. I was just talking to somebody here who is from the islands, and we're talking about how we're all Africans, but we're not really sure if we're really all Africans because they're like from the islands or something. It's like so. Recent statistics tell us that 20% of the current Black population in the U.S. was either born in Africa or have at least one parent from the African continent. And in the light of this, we just want to get your reaction, Dr. Paul and Trina Jackson, about how is the Black community changing in the 21st century. I mean, we know there are many facets to this. We have the identity facet, we have the policy facet of things, we have the economic angle to things. So we just want you to shed some light on this from your area of expertise or your area of interest. Thank you.
Well, I guess I will. Okay, I'm going to stick my foot out first, or my neck, as it may be. A subject that's very dear to my heart. It's true that the book that I just published is about people from Madagascar, both slaves and sailors, of whom there were many that came to the U.S. in the 19th century from various parts of Africa. But my major focal point in most of my research has been West Africa, I just want to say. And I have a couple of points that I'm just going to put out there because I think Trina and I will enjoy exchanging our views. When I try to think about what the big difference is, I want to first point out that there is an illusion that African Americans have been isolated until recently. And this is an illusion that has been created by politics, identity politics, more than it is historically founded. So you find that, for example, Cape Verdeans came to the United States at the turn of the century. Jamaicans came in many different ways, as did other people from the Caribbean. We had our first wave of Haitians at the time of the Haitian Revolution. And they arrived to New Orleans, Charleston, South Carolina, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and New York, where they had several sponsoring organizations. So we also know, at least I have found out, that there were some people who came from the Comoros in East Africa in the 1890s to New York. Senegalese tirailleurs, soldiers, came to Harlem in the 1940s. So why didn't we see them? So what I'd like to suggest is why we didn't see them is that there was a different political climate. That people came to the United States, but they were sort of forced to be Black, whether they wanted to be or not. And I don't mean Black in a political sense, but in terms of identity. Everybody has their own identity that is more than whatever the host country might call them. And I think this question also came up with Puerto Ricans when they started coming up to New York, when African Americans had a hard time understanding why Puerto Ricans insisted on saying they were Puerto Rican. Finally, I just want to say, to get us started, that for me, one of the biggest changes is the transnational character of our current new diaspora. So the first point is that the old diaspora is in itself an aggregate of sort of hidden arrivals. Remember, too, that illegal slavery continued until the 1860s. And according to Stark, Obadele Stark, and other authors, at least perhaps 12,000 people arrived to the United States directly from Africa up until between 1808 and 1865. So we do have some families who actually are only counting back 3 or 4 generations to an African ancestor. But the African American community was much more insular. I think that one of the exciting things that we can talk about is the transnational character of the current wave of arrivals from the continent of Africa, and the very exciting possibilities that those communities bring. New blood, new ideas, new challenges to the United States. So I'll just stop there.
Yeah. You know, I think that transnational character that you're talking about, it's really visible in the Black Lives Matter movement with the young activists that have really started to have a much more sort of global politic about blackness that, you know, previous movements, Black-led movements, didn't really have so explicitly.
That's right.
And I think that, you know, the implications for like our changing diaspora means that we have a much more diverse, inclusive Black liberation movement. And my perspective in this conversation is very much from that experience. My work is pretty much around organizing and leadership development and social justice. And so the work that I do with the Network for Immigrants and African Americans in Solidarity is we talk a lot about structural and institutionalized racism and systems of oppression on multiple levels. And we talk a lot about, you know, how do we have solidarity beyond just identity? But that our solidarity is also based on real problems that we have to solve as Black communities across the diaspora. I think that, you know, one of the changes is that what it means to be Black doesn't just include African American anymore, right? And that ancestral connection doesn't come from, you know, your people having been enslaved in the U.S., which is for African Americans like myself. I was born and raised in the South. I identified with the culture that's about gospel music, the church, jazz, you know, collard greens, macaroni and cheese, you know. So that is my cultural reference and my cultural heritage. But a more diverse, changing diaspora means that there are lots of different cultural references. And that makes our community vibrant, and we can have a much more, I don't know, just a vibrant liberation movement.
You know what you make me think about too is that we're really living in a very exciting time in terms of the long durée of the story of the Black people.
Right.
And one of the things that sort of precedes or is right on the cusp of this era is the fabulous research that's been done by Africanists, which before did not really lead into the study of the old diaspora.
Yeah.
So when I talk about the old diaspora, just to make it simple, I'm talking about people who arrived before 1900. That's the way I define it, because the more I study, the more I find that they're all kind of unexpected people who were coming here. So rather than simply saying the people who had ancestors as slaves, I prefer simply to say the people who are the descendants of those who came before 1900. But when I look at work by people like Gwendolyn Middle Hall, Michael Gomez, Rosalind Shaw, and others, all kinds of Black people in the States now are able to know much more about who came here in the 18th and 19th century. So whereas before it was this amalgam black mass, we now know that what the ethnic groups were and where they arrived in the United States.
Yeah.
So we know what if ethnic groups from Africa were in Louisiana. We know who was predominant in Virginia. This is really important in terms of African Americans being able to grasp what African immigrants are trying to tell them
Yeah.
about identity. To know that there is some hook back there that may not be direct, but at least can situate African Americans in a historical context. And I just want to say too that the fact, even though it has been, I will admit, it has been the cause of some stress
Definitely.
and antagonism. I think it's great that there have been African immigrants teaching in Africana Studies programs. Some of my colleagues wouldn't like me to say that, I think, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think that this kind of irritants that we see here are not unlike when African Americans went to South Africa. South Africans said, okay, wait a minute, I'm glad you helped us, but there are only so many jobs. We invite you to return. So now we are in that situation here where some African Americans, and I'm sure you know much more about this than I do, are feeling this pressure if they see a black person who's Haitian American or Ghanaian American. Oh, they're taking my job. We fought for this and now they're taking the position. But we actually did that to South Africans, so I think it's a sort of a global problem.
Yeah, this narrative about who is stealing whose jobs is something. Is sort of a power narrative that we try to deconstruct in our conversations a lot, because part of a lot of the analysis that we talk about is that this idea that immigrants are stealing jobs from African Americans or poor people is a narrative that's been sort of projected onto people by corporations and the media, and for the purposes of kind of like the divide and conquer strategy, which has been well used and is very successful in the U.S. by like the white supremacist power structure. And so part of what we've had to do in our dialogues is really try to like counter that myth. In a globalized economy, there are competition for jobs, especially low-wage jobs, but those, and that's real, and we don't have to hide from the tensions that does create in our communities. But I think that we need to have a much bigger, more sophisticated analysis about what the root causes of those competitions for jobs are coming from.
And to piggyback on that a little bit, I think that the current generation and the generation right before that who came after the civil rights movements don't have the same exposure to the political process and participation. So they don't have the same understanding of how important alliances are.
Right.
And I bring that up because I can remember my father talking about how African diplomats sat in restaurants to provoke debates about integration when I was a little girl in the 60s, which they did do. And to be brutally frank or blunt or whatever, we also know that in our day-to-day social interactions, sometimes white Americans are more comfortable with African immigrants than with their own black people who are bringing all their baggage with them. So if I were to think strategically, it seems to me that there's certain contributions that African immigrants can make because they can have certain conversations and even collect certain information that we may not be privy to immediately.
Yeah.
And maybe I've been chastened a little bit because I know that I've been in France many times when I was insulted because people thought I was an African immigrant. And then I would pull out my passport. Oh, madame, pardon. You know. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. When I go to France, they think I'm from the banlieue. They want to give me a hard time. I say, excuse me, I have this passport. They cool off a little bit. The same way that a Nigerian can come here and have exactly the same experience. So that's telling us something about sort of transnational problems of whiteness and transnational problems of marginalization, I think, that black people are experiencing in different ways in different venues.
Yes, it is very different for African Americans to engage with white people in the U.S. Our relationship and our history is very different, and very much shaped by the legacy of slavery.
Yeah.
And not only that, when I say the legacy of slavery, I just don't mean that period, that particular time period. I mean the ongoing legacies that are systemic and are institutionalized. So our relationship to like the white power structure, and a lot of times we say it's not just white people, it's the white power structure. It's white supremacy, which is institutional and structural. You know, many of us, you know, have, you know, it's our really trying to push this conversation that it isn't just about our individual interactions with white people, but it's sort of a white power structure that has continued to dehumanize black people through not valuing African American contributions to anything, in fact, writing them out of history, marginalizing them in terms of their meaningfulness, in terms of, you know, its contributions to U.S. history. So it is a very different kind of relationship.
You know, sometimes I think black people are trying to get out of the position of having to be sort of a nurse, African Americans.
Oh, African Americans in particular.
Because there is a very clear dysfunction happening, where not only have African Americans been here since the Revolutionary War, but a great many white people are related to a great many black people, which they do not want to remember. So it's a painful history, and African Americans, all Americans, can't get past it without going through it. And I think that it's a job.
Yeah.
You know, it's a job, but I think that for when I see African students taking African American history courses, I'm really happy, because I think that, or when I see African American students taking courses about the Caribbean or Africa, I want all students to know more about the world in general, but in particular, we should all try to know about our particular histories. And I think I see in my classes, which are very diverse with different kinds of black students, it's very liberating. Even for the white students, it's very liberating to know the history and to face it and to talk about it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really like, and I'm going to bring up Black Lives Matter again, because there's a lot about this movement that I really appreciate. And I like this emphasis on black love. And when I think about black love throughout the diaspora, what does it mean for us as black people, from wherever we're from, to really love each other? And I think for African Americans, you know, part of our healing journey has been to really love ourselves and to reject a lot of the messages about ourselves that we've internalized for generations. And part of that is because of the institutions, because of the educational system, you know, because of the economic system. Not only have we worked hard externally for, you know, civil rights and, you know, to correct the institutions and to make sure that the U.S. lives up to its democracy, this ideals of democracy or whatever that's supposed to mean, but that we've worked hard as a people to kind of love each other. And you know, and all the examples all of the stereotypes that many immigrants, African, Latino, Asian immigrants, many immigrants get messages about those blacks, right? Stay away from those blacks, the African Americans. We're very aware that that's the messages that people are getting about interacting with our community. And that's hurtful.
Yes, it is.
It's painful.
And there's also a certain naivete. If I go to Togo next week, am I going to know all the nuances of class in Togo? Am I going to know who are the leading families of Togo? Who are the people I should avoid in Togo? In Lomé. By the same token, I think one of the problems we have is that without realizing it, African immigrants are pulled into this vortex of seeing a monolithic black population so that they don't actually get a chance to think about, this is an educated African American. This is a middle class African American. This is a poor drug addict African American. Rather than attributing all behavior to one sort of standard. But at the same time, I think one of the problems is a historic one, which is that African Americans, and I'm working on this a little, are deterritorialized. I don't know if any of you had to read Apodori in any of your courses, but they have suffered through an experience of extreme mobility within the United States. They have had to flee because of danger or because of terrorism, such as the Ku Klux Klan, or because of undercover real estate deals. So they have not been able to develop a really healthy relationship to a territory. This makes African Americans very different from other black people in the diaspora. Remember that African Americans are a minority here. So in Haiti or Jamaica, people have been able to get a sense of a certain power over their community. So when somebody comes, they can say, "You're welcome. This is how we do it in Jamaica. You're welcome." African Americans' existence is so tenuous that I don't even think most African Americans are even aware that they could have said "you're welcome." Because I think they think everybody sees, well, don't you see I'm tottering here on the edge? They think it's apparent. They think nobody knows the trouble I see. But actually, everybody doesn't know it.
Yeah.
And so African Americans disappoint, I think, black immigrants by their indifference and sometimes their crassness or their ignorance about the places where people are coming from, so that they just shut off. And politically, we need to start thinking about that as a lost opportunity. But I think it goes both ways.
I think it goes both ways, and I also think, too, that there's an opportunity, though, for the real relationship building, that we do create the spaces like this conversation, where we do have these kind of dialogues, and that we're able to be sort of real with each other, and then it all comes from a place of love. Now, I don't want to gloss over that we have different perspectives, and that there aren't real tensions and real differences in how we react to adversity, so to speak, racism and discrimination and so forth. So, you said something that had me thinking about, for all of these struggles that as African Americans we are facing, the power of our culture has fundamentally changed this country and even the world when it comes to music, literature, the arts.
Sure.
And that sustains us as a people. Now, we know that a lot of that is exploited, because of capitalism and so forth. But I feel like that for us has been I don't know why I really want to call it like
A resource.
A resource, right? For strength and a positive sort of self-image, not again in the in terms of like the superficial, who's buying records and so
Right.
forth and so on. I mean, that's either the cultural appropriation that sort of happens, but I'm talking about culture that roots people in an identity,
Yeah.
so that they feel good about who they are.
I want to ask you what you think, because I might be kind of cynical.
Okay.
But
Me too.
sometimes,
I'm cynical.
okay. Sometimes I think that one of the problems is that African Americans are actually at a nadir. That we are at one of the lowest points we have ever been at since we became a community, in my
In
point
what
of
way?
view.
How do you mean?
Well, it's actually been found out that in the 80s, the state of the black family was worse than it was 30 years after slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have the same coherence that we did, as no communities do, in the United States for that matter, 30 years ago. So we're not able to call on the same community mechanisms that we used to have. I feel that in many ways African Americans are more down than they've ever been, even though in some ways we've made a few high jumps, high leaps to,
So we have a black president.
yeah. So I think that people are seeing us. It's like we've made many achievements. I mean, there wouldn't be African students in these universities if it wasn't for African Americans who integrated these schools and agitated. But that's not where African Americans are at right now.
Yeah, and
I feel like we're like somebody who's been punched in the jaw, and somebody gets there and says, "Why are they lying on the floor like that in the dirt?"
And these are systemic attacks too. That's the
Sure.
thing. These are institutions that have destabilized black communities, destabilized black families. When you have, a housing crisis, when you have redlining, when you have defunding of schools, when you have
Terrorist police.
policing. So these are like, people are vulnerable to these kind of systems. And what I think you're talking about is the impact of like the systemic oppression that has had its impact on like black communities in lots of ways.
And also that I would like African immigrants to know that they're coming in at a certain point in African American history. That African Americans have not always been at this point. They have been at many different points.
Mm-hmm.
If they had come in at 1972, maybe they would have seen a lot of people walking around saying, "Hey, brother, I got a map of Africa on my jacket." And even if they were ill-informed, there would have been a different, I think, ethos.
Well, can we talk about the map of Africa on the back of the jacket? Because that's a beautiful thing. But I also think that as African Americans, we have sort of mythologized Africa. We, part of our experience as people is that our connection to our African ancestors we were denied knowing who those were as part of the institution of slavery. And so, where we weren't allowed to really know our history.
We weren't allowed to talk about it.
We weren't even allowed to talk about it. So in this effort to connect to something that's rooted, and many of us don't have the resources to travel outside of the country. For a while, that was largely a black middle class luxury,
Still in.
pretty much, is to be able to travel to different parts of Africa where our ancestors may have come from so that we can see the land of our ancestors. That's not within the reach of many
Most.
poor and most
Yeah.
African Americans. So this connection to Africa is a little. It's like many African Americans don't know the contemporary issues facing African countries. And so there's this kind of story of kings and queens, and many of us are kind of still there, right? And so I think that there's I think that there's a lot of like education and knowing
Yeah.
for us to do.
Yeah, I really agree with you.
And I feel like that's something that we should start to
Yeah.
work toward.
I really agree with you because I also think that we don't know our own history.
We don't know our history.
Because I think that the whole idea, as I'm sure many people here know, the whole idea of Pan-Africanism developed because people of different African backgrounds had to face the fact that they weren't going to be able to go home, and that they belonged to a new community. So if you read David Walker, or if you read Sterling Stuckey,
Yeah.
then you can get a view into that 19th century world, which really isn't that long ago, when African Americans were trying to figure out who they were,
Yeah.
or what to even
Call
to
ourselves.
call themselves.
Who
But
are we?
I also have to say, to play the devil's advocate, that a lot of African Americans don't want to know about Africa. And African Americans always have to recreate the world. It's a very, you tell me Atlas Shrugged. Tough on Atlas. African Americans have done more than shrug as they have carried the globe.
Yeah. Because
Every
we're Americans,
generation.
we've internalized the American
And
ideals
also we
about-
fight to change it, and then every generation we have to do it
We
again.
have to do it again. Yeah.
You both make really compelling points, and I know that the audience has probably
I
have a
hope
lot
so.
to react to
Yeah.
this. And you make a really important point about the mythological stereotypes or impressions that exist on both sides. Like you said, for many African Americans, the whole myth about kings and queens, and he's a real African prince and things like that.
Yeah.
And for Africans, coming to the U.S., it's that thing of, like you said, stay away from them, don't be, that kind of thing. So it's a lot of mythology going on both ends. So I'm really curious to know if anybody in the crowd has like reactions or questions for our panelists. We'll take 3 questions or reactions at once, and they will answer those 3 reactions, and then we just go from there. Okay, someone behind you. Yeah.
Ms. Wendy,
Yeah.
you mentioned that African Americans disappoint Africans by their indifference. I can't remember the whole quote. My perspective on that is that I feel it's both ways.
Yeah, I think it is.
Because Africans actually, as an African, I really didn't know any African American history prior to coming here, and I think that's the big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with you.
And to solve the indifference that African Americans have, I feel Africans have to solve the indifference and learn about the history of African Americans, especially with the slavery part of it.
Thank you very much for that comment, and I think that eventually, or if I had a wish, it would be that Africans would begin to see the potential value of cultivating African Americans for strategic reasons, rather than worrying about how more or less African they are. If we can cultivate Peace Corps volunteers who don't know anything about Africa when they get there, then we can certainly cultivate people of African descent who are trying to learn something in spite of their apparent ignorance. So thank you very much for that remark.
And I think we need structured spaces like this one
Good point.
to have those kind of dialogues, and then just take it upon ourselves to initiate those spaces, especially when they feel hard and when it feels it's not easy for us to have this conversation. Like, I know I'm having some like visceral feelings about it, right? And I imagine that many of us do when we're trying to have hard conversations about things that are really hard to talk about. But we have to push through that and have them anyway. It's worth it.
We had a
There's
reaction.
somebody
from the
back there too. This young man had his hand up for a long time.
Okay.
Thank you. I want to touch upon your point about how it's kind of like, African Americans don't want to make that step and go to Africa because, to a certain extent, it's how much of it do you think is financial, and how much of it, like you said, is just not. How do we spark that interest in going to even somewhere like Ghana that's, you know, safe, you know.
I get back to her point about education. You know, I was very lucky. The first time I went to Africa, and I was born around almost the time of the dinosaurs. I was 16, and I went back many times after that. Every time I came back, I would tell people, "You've got to go to Africa. You've got to go to Africa." And these people would be sitting there with huge television sets, the latest thing to play music, bragging about new cars, and tell me they didn't have the money to go to Africa. I don't get it. So I think it's something else. I think it's here. And that's why I get back to her important point. Because there was a time when in the African American community that people talked about black positionality vis-a-vis a materialist culture, about vis-a-vis trying to keep up with the Joneses or being Mr. Super Capitalist. And we've kind of lost that. So I don't know what you say, but to me it's education. It's like she's saying, having these kinds of discussions, because people don't even realize they're making those choices a lot of times, and they're scared.
Hi. Is it me?
Yeah.
Okay, it's me. Thank you, guys. I'm really glad that I'm here. There's a lot of things that I have a question about, and you guys all touched on, both of you. But speaking on that issue is that I am from Africa. I've been here for 12 years. The first community that I lived in was full of African Americans. And it's experience on both sides where African Americans believe that, you know, stay away from African American idea that these other Africans think they're better than us, and, you know, kind of like push us aside or kind of mistreat us. I mean, I've had a horrible experience, but I didn't let that affect me. I had to look past it. But what is happening is that we have TVs in Africa, and what we see of Africans in the United States is what you guys see. It's a bad, you know, portrayal of, you know, you see the thug, the criminal, this and that. And on this side, what African Americans see is the poverty and
Yes, that's right.
so
the flies.
it's both sides. On both sides, we have this image, and yes, some of them I've seen ones that I want to go see Africa are passionate, and there's one who's like, I'm not going to go to Africa. It's a horrible place. And that brings the issue. The first thing I had in mind was that there's kind of like identity crisis all over again with the Black Lives Matter movement and Black love and Black consciousness. And, you know, it's like, it seems like it was this unity, and then as it goes on, I see some kind of a division where some are identifying, some are saying, like, now there's the new thing of, we're actually not from Africa. We don't have any, we were here. And you have ones say, no, we came from Africa, and it kind of gets confusing. And I have once, you know, friends who say, I'm not black. Why are you calling me black? And for me, black just stands being African. But it just really gets confusing, and I'm so desperately trying to find, what do we call ourselves as African? It doesn't matter where you're from, it doesn't matter where you're born, that we can call ourselves, that is like a center of our identity and unity and love. Because I feel like we're within our movements, and there's kind of like this arguments of what we should call ourselves and who we are. And so, yeah, I'm just hoping that, what would that be?
Well, I think that you posed the question beautifully, and I don't think that there's any easy answers without there being like real self-reflection, real dialogue. I think it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard because there are so many different dynamics of just what you talked about. There's the stereotypes, there's the history, there's the feeling, there's the lived experience, there's the confusion, there's the, I don't know you, you don't know me, you don't understand where I'm coming from, I don't get you. There's all of that stuff, and we have to work through all of it.
I'll just add, and I'm going to impress you, and you're going to impress me. And, you know, one of the things that kind of I used to laugh at when I was going back and forth is that in America, the African Americans are thinking, if Africa could just make it, they'll be big and powerful enough, and these white people will get off on our backs. If only Africa would rise. And then you go to Africa, and the Africans are saying, if only the African Americans could get their soldiers.
Is that happening?
They can come and save us.
That's happening. Okay.
What a
Okay.
position.
So people are shaking their heads. All right. All right. So we got a lot to figure out, right? So we got a lot to figure out.
Okay, so there's, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Todd.
I have a question for both of you. How does one go about instilling a sense of pride and identity without mystifying? I mean, is it mythifying? Mystifying Africa, and also without only referencing the civil rights movement and the fight against this white supremacy that we're talking about. I feel like there's two directions when you're trying to make a little black boy or a little black girl proud of who she is. It's either referencing the kings and queens in Africa or the civil rights leaders all over the walls. So how do we go about building that pride?
I believe that each child, one of the things we're confusing is that children need to feel important, whatever color they are. So if you take a child and you're just giving them ideology, it's not going to be enough. To have a coherent personality, a child needs somebody to look them in the face and say, you are fabulous. You know, I'll just use Senegal as an example, or Mali, where children have the names of their lineage, so that if their last name is Njai, you can be 6 years old and everybody say, Njai, Njai, Njai. Ah, Njai, Njai, Yankee Njai. So the little kid, oh, well, I've been Njai. You see? So that black children are not getting enough love and comfort for their personality development, number one, I believe. And number two, there are many things we can say to them about the fact that they even exist, that they are survivors. And also, I think as an academic, what's so frustrating to me is there's so many things that have been answered, but the information doesn't move. There's all kinds of stuff that we know. We don't have to go to the kings and queens. We can even go to the farmers and the traders.
People in our community that are doing wonderful things.
But we don't, the information isn't moving. So if, just like the African Studies centers do, if more schools could partner with African Studies and African American Studies or Africana Studies centers, and really try to take advantage of the professors that are there in their libraries, that would probably help if there were even reading hours.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah. So pulling this whole conversation back to the African diaspora angle of things, you know, just kind of reminding us here to, you know, let that fuel our thought, because our thinking today is about, you know, the African diaspora. Like, how do we? Personally, I think.
Well, I think African Americans are part of the African diaspora.
That's what I was going to say.
One of the things I'm really desperate to promote is, in some ways, to de-essentialize African Americans and let them just take their place on the bench next to the Jamaicans and the Brazilians. I mean, I'm happy I'm an African American, but at some point people have to understand Black Americans are just another community in the Black diaspora.
Yeah.
And they deserve that type of research.
And Black history it's African history.
But you're talking about the new diaspora, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have made the point that, you know, African Americans are the Black diaspora as well. You know, and they are a part of the Black diaspora as well. And that's not a thought that is, you know, resident in our minds a lot of times. Yeah.
Well, thanks for the contribution. So, I lived in Nigeria. I grew up in Nigeria. And it's interesting, as the gentleman over there mentioned, you know, when you were on the other side of the Atlantic, there's a different ballgame mentality. I mean, you don't know racism, although there are other, you know, other form of oppression in a way, you know, class, you know, and things like that. But what is and I was at the university back in Nigeria before I came here. And as a university student, I was literally surprised when I got here and I saw how miseducated and uninformed I was as an individual. You know, and I think it goes both ways here. I mean, I see people approach me and think that, oh, you're from Nigeria, or you're from Africa, I heard you guys married 10 wives. Like, that is a, you know, that is
part of the ignorance.
That's part of the
education.
ignorance.
Yeah.
So, and what I'm actually looking at here, is especially when you try to conceptualize human experience in you know, as an institutional, as people or as events that's flowing within an institutional framework, you know, then what are some of the institutional problem solutions that we could apply to this? And you mentioned that education plays a really crucial role, because even there's another dimension. There's a reason why in places like Senegal, Ghana, or Nigeria, you have people that will, you know, sleep at the U.S. embassy,
That's
you know,
right.
for months. You know, they're ready to kill their mother just to be able to come. Poverty plays a role, and one of the things that's really important to me is understanding the psychology of poverty, you know, in itself, you know, so which is completely different here. You know, so because what you'll see on that side of the Atlantic is, you know, all the good stuff. They don't show you the Dorchesters of the United States. They don't show you the, you know, craziness going on in Ferguson. You know, and then when you get here as well, you see people were so misinformed, and you know, either, you know, romanticized in a way. Yeah, we have all the Shongay and all the Ashanti and all the, you know, Timbuktu and all the, you know, Egyptian pharaoh. Yes, absolutely, it's part of our history. We need to make claim to that. But at the same time, you know, I think that it could be over romanticized in a way that denies the current challenges. And when you look at this in an institutional framework, you see that the capitalist system is actually doing damage not just to us as American, but also to the entire world. And what has that done to us as a people, as black people?
I agree with you.
You know, so education is taking the education route as an institutional, you know, way. But what are the other channels in this you know, hierarchical, well, in terms of hierarchy here?
Can I answer with a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think the role of hip hop has been? Has it been a good vehicle for cultural exchange or not?
I think hip hop has had a negative role in places like, and I can't talk on Africa. That's not. I'm not an expert
there
on
are many
Africa.
African hip hop.
So because the thing here is, you don't listen to. I mean, for instance, you know, hip hop. You in Nigeria, for example, you listen to "Get Rich or Die Trying," as opposed to something from Nas or something from The Roots or something from Black President, you know, or Dead President, or something that is, you know, that builds your consciousness and expose you to all of the problems that exist. So that's another thing. I think that and I think that I don't know whether there is an institutional agenda here, because the kind of music that is prevalent in the part of the world that I come from, they are the ones that they're so, you know, they're misogynistic, they're sexist, they're really weird.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I think a lot of us feel the same way about some of the music that is privileged here. That a lot of hip hop is called misogynistic and crazy.
Yeah, because it is misogynistic. But I think if I'm hearing a part of your question about within institutions, where is the framework or the spaces to get more information and more education that's outside of what is like immediately presented to serve some other higher global sort of structural agenda. And I feel like that's where our opportunities are. I think that we really have to initiate those opportunities. They're not the ones that are going to be presented to us, because they don't serve the overall agenda, right? Which is the typical world the order. We have to go outside of that. We have to seek those opportunities, just like you have to seek out the Nas's and the Talib Kweli's. I'm sorry, you know, the people that are making like positive, healing messages.
Most
We have to
definitely.
seek those things
Most
out because
definitely.
they're not presented to us, and that's the extra work that we have to do as a community, and to understand that that's not going to be immediately presented to us because it doesn't serve the bigger agenda.
And unfortunately, here we are, your elders, giving you work to do.
There's always work. And this,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
So
want me to facilitate
let's
the
hear,
Q&A. Okay,
him,
yeah,
and
then
then
people.
we'll take care of the back.
Yeah.
Well, first I'll identify as I'm one of the elders. And I'm Southern, and I'm a product of the Civil Rights Movement, so my perspective is flavored by that. But I want to piggyback on something I just heard you say, but an observation is that, first of all, we are a privileged group in this room.
That's
We
right.
are.
Privilege in class is
Absolutely.
very important, and a
Yes, it
very
is.
important phenomenon that must be integrated very well into this dialogue.
Yes.
You can't separate it,
That's
That's
right.
because that influences a lot of dynamics.
Yes.
Part of what I see in this culture, part of what has happened is, as affirmative action has created an opportunity for a number of people of color in this country to move up the economic ladder, which further separates the opportunity for dialogue and creates more class
Yes.
divisions and lines.
That's right. I
Okay?
agree with you.
And has been a salve, if you will.
Yeah.
Money, economics.
Yeah.
You look at
Yeah.
our entertainers, our athletes. Where are they in these dialogues? Those are structures and formats and
Yes.
opportunities for
Yeah.
additional dialogues.
Yes, yeah.
Okay? And I want to point out one structure that I think is woefully dangerous, and that's the church. The dialogue between Christians and Muslims is a dialogue that needs to heat up
Yeah.
and go someplace quickly, because we are at risk on this globe if we don't do that. And the dialogues that we're having now will be meaningless if we don't address what is, I think, the next major issue that will capture race, and culture, and economics.
And
Stop
do you see that as particular within the church? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think
That
the church, there are a number of Christians who have the church, and I am a Christian and active in the church.
Yeah.
What I see is the church has not progressed and changed its message and been embracing change
Yeah.
and created different messages and different dialogue and different ways to be and exist.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is too traditional and stuck.
Yeah.
And a strong example of that is its attitude and opinions about homosexuality.
Yes.
I'll stop there.
Yeah.
And mass incarceration
Mass
hasn't
incarceration,
been
yeah.
spoken for very much.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll collectively react to after we get her.
Oh,
opinion.
sure. Yeah.
So you struck a nerve a few sentences ago, and I lost my train of thought. But I wanted to say that we have to answer the call to teach. If we're going to dismantle anything collectively and heal as a people,
Yeah.
we cannot close the door and let ill-prepared communities and forces and people educate an entire generation of our children. Because their teachers their hearts are in the right place, they're well-intentioned, but they're answering a corporate call to standardize everything.
Yes, they are.
And our history is not included in a standardized test. So if they're going to learn it, they have to learn it in the institution that we call school. And there are far too many black and brown faces in the field of education. And even if it's only 3 years, and in your second year you're mentoring and pulling a friend and say, come on, you got to do 3, then it gets a pipeline going. And it gets that validation in the classroom. So at least the knowledge is getting sprinkled in through that lengthy, boring school day.
And I think if you look back at the civil rights movement, what you'll see is that people started informal groups outside of the formal structures.
Community schools.
They created community schools and
Freedom
study
schools.
groups, and I would suggest that that is going to be much more valuable on both sides of the Atlantic, and that it's up to this younger generation who have this opportunity to know each other, and you have many allies in other ethnic communities, to create centers of discussion
Yeah.
in Africa and here that helps people place themselves in the world. You know, because, you know, you go to Africa, people, America, yeah, how did it get there? The Africans built, you know, half of what's here. And now you're mystified by America and you feel like it's something that you have no relationship to. So I think on both sides, if I may people have to remember who their great-great-grandparents were, and even beyond. You were talking about kids. People have to realize that their actual, this is what I've seen, their actual relatives came from Africa, not everybody, but somebody was actually a person who got on a boat, who was actually their own ancestor in Virginia or South Carolina. Those first generations were Africans. That's what African Americans are traumatized not to think about. You know, so it's a healing,
Absolutely.
these kind of small groups where people can discuss.
And those are other institutions that we can create.
Mm-hmm.
Our freedom schools, our discussion circles.
That's right.
I think there's
Yeah, lady.
there.
Yeah.
So I have a question about, you touched on this when you talked about the deterritorialization of African Americans. But can you kind of explore the idea of privilege around African Americans, if you think that that is something that plays a role in the separation? Because
The idea of
privilege around African Americans that do live in the United States and are in a country that is like a global power, for example. So
You mean that African Americans who are in a position of privilege because they're in the United States, or they
yeah.
feel privileged?
Are in a position of privilege because they live in the United States and they are American. They have a passport that allows them to travel around the world. They come from a country that, you know, if you're applying for a job anywhere and you're an American person, you just tend to have a higher status. And so I feel it maybe that the separation of African American people comes from the fact that countries like Jamaica in the Caribbean or Nigeria or Ghana, those are just in the global context tend to be less powerful. So, like, do you think that plays a role in the division between the different communities?
Yes, I think that, as we said earlier, African Americans don't have the same mechanisms that they used to have to talk about their political position in this country. Now everything is be a good soldier, be a good citizen, make everybody love you, show them how good you can be, when there used to be a much different dialogue happening in the African American community. However, I don't think we can talk about African Americans in a blanket statement. For 50% of African Americans, they have never rested. That's what people don't realize. Poor African Americans have never rested from the moment their ancestors came to this country. And I'll give you an example. That's my great-grandfather, that picture right there. Unfortunately, that's not an accident. That's the truth of class. And I'm prepared to admit that 50% of African Americans have never had a break. So those are not the people you're talking about. They do not feel lucky. This is a nightmare for 50% of African Americans. Now you have another 40% who, because of very tiny advantages, have been able to scrape up the funeral directors, the barbers, the people who worked in the black colleges. Those people have a national, African Americans, W.B. Du Bois said it, we got an identity crisis. We are Americans, but when we're in America, we're only black. So, and to me, African Americans have a very tenuous citizenship situation. We're like citizens on probation, always. So, with that mentality, people don't even see the opportunities that are in front of them. See, it's clearer for somebody who's coming from outside. I want that. I'm going to get it. But the people who've been here have been constantly battered with this idea that, you know, I haven't quite made up my mind. You're kind of interesting, but we're just not sure yet. And so this is really destabilized. I mean, you're right in the larger picture. But no, those conversations aren't really happening as they used to when you had Eric Williams and you had Stokely Carmichael from Trinidad, and you had these other people who were active in the black community talking about these kind of contradictions.
We have someone over there.
Oh, and someone in the back too.
Oh, okay.
Can she go first?
Yeah.
Yes, I want to say I feel lucky to be here, and thank you for both for having us. My question, you both talked about, I think that the theme here is the importance of education, and you both talked about educating the systems and the world that we live in. How do you educate institutions that sometimes is either racism or discrimination or not being wanted, is obvious or not obvious, without coming across as an angry black woman?
Without coming across as an angry black woman. Well, I feel like we have a lot to be angry about. And so I think that we understand that label as being one that's meant to silence. And so that we understand that, and that we continue to voice, push back, articulate. I think that when we're in institutions, that institutions are set up to function a particular way. So they are not designed to always value and honor who we are. That's not the way institutions are set up. They're not set up to do that. That's not their interest. And so I feel like if we understand that and we're clear about that, we can have strategies that where we feel like we are engaging with these systems on our own terms.
Yeah, that's right.
And I feel like that is it's a moving, it ebbs and flows, right? Sometimes it's easier than others, and we have to pick our battles, sort of thing. I don't mean to say that we compromise on our values and our principles, but I think we have to be clear that institutions are not designed for us. And the angry black this and are silencing mechanisms. We have a lot to be angry about. We don't have to burn everything down, but we have a lot to be angry about. And I want you to know that I'm angry about that. And I'm going to write a paper about why I'm angry about that. And I'm going to push back on this lecture about some of the inaccuracies of your lecture about this. That I'm angry. That's how I'm going to show my anger. I'm not going to burn the classroom down, but I'm going to push back against. Do you know what I'm saying? So we have a lot to be angry about. I am an angry black woman. I just want to say, I'm an angry black woman.
I guess just kind of picking back off of what she said, I know you talked about institutions, but what about the corporate culture? You know, I think diversity and inclusion is always a hot topic, I think, in corporations.
Yeah.
But, and sometimes they make the effort with diversity, but inclusion is really, really hard. Yes. I work in a corporate office where it's, I'm one of maybe one on my floor. In my division, it's like 2 of us, you know what I mean, out of like 300. And I feel it so strongly, and I've had those conversations with my direct manager, and he's a white male, and he always says to me that he can't really relate to what I'm saying, and the conversation kind of stops there. And it's a hard conversation to have when you're the only one like that, and people have been in the company for 15, 20 years, and they don't want to see a change. Yeah. So what does that look like?
Can you make, following what she was saying, can you, for example, find allies among your white colleagues to ask for training and microaggression?
You find them, but even they talk to you almost in secret. They'll say, meet me here, back over here. It's funny because I found some who will support and understand me, but they don't go to bat for me.
Right, because they don't want to upset it for themselves, right? They're about preserving their own sort of white privilege within those institutions. I feel like this is really hard, what you're talking about. It isn't just in corporate America, but it's also in our nonprofits. It's in our universities. This idea of just like most of our nonprofits and corporate cultures is all about like a white dominance culture, and it's really, really difficult.
It's scary
to change that. I think that you're called upon to either be very cynical or go play the part and get the money, and then be another person later on that day and on the weekends, or to seriously consider ways that you can build a community that brings in training, because what they basically need is training, and whoever those managers are, ironically, are not the top managers. Because this is the funny gap that's happening in the States right now. The very top managers are looking for people with cultural competence. They understand that this is what the future is. But it's the people in the middle who, very often, who haven't gotten the message yet and who resist and who make it hard. So I agree with her, it's not easy.
I can give you my contact information if you want. I have some ideas and some strategies you might be able to use.
Wendy,
Yes.
you mentioned earlier in your presentation something we've lost.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. We forgot about you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
The partnerships and coalitions that were part of the civil rights movement, and that we've lost that phenomenon in our present.
Yeah.
How do we get that back? You know, when I look at this room and I see generational differences, you know, I see these young people in the room. I'm 66 years old. You know, partnering with a younger generation is a challenge as well.
Sure.
Because our perspectives are different. But those partnerships are essential because this is our future.
Yes.
So I guess I'm putting out there that challenge of is how do we bridge these gaps and come back to those kinds of relationships that move us all forward.
Does everybody hear this? Okay, so there you go, right?
Yeah.
One is that we put it out there that we need to do that, and we're in the space where that can actually start to happen right now.
Right.
And I think this lately, for the last 20 years, the type of education that people have been receiving has not served them well.
Yes.
So very often people think in terms of absolutes. They have not been taught how to think in nuance. And somehow we've got to get back to that, because I was, you know, in a class the other day, and I was saying, which was about 80% white. I said, never think that white people were not there helping African Americans since the beginning.
They elected Obama.
Right. And so the problem is not that the white people weren't there, but that the other white people have silenced those white people. But, you know, to just even encourage the white students, don't think that you are outside of the story. You know, so, but even they and the black students have grown up thinking that in absolute, the black people did the civil rights all on their own. It's a black problem. The black people are going to have to solve that. I don't know. It's, but I think the kind of work, for example, that Trina is doing is so essential because she's out there in the
trenches.
In the trenches.
Well, we in many ways we all are.
Yeah, that's true. Different ways.
Lived experience.
I just wanted to also share with you, the panelists, how I was having a conversation with a group of students before this started, and they were all African students, and you know, one was sharing with me how the same thing about, you know, you're coming to the U.S., you're not sure, you know, would they accept me? You know, I don't feel accepted, and things like that by people from African American. From the African American community, and for me it was, as you know, as someone coming from Nigeria, I felt that way. And then I was doing my master's in public policy, and my professor said to me, if you want to be engaged in any kind of policy work in the U.S., you have to take a class on racism. You just have to. And so I did a class, and the history, the background information I got totally changed my perspective about America and African Americans. So I'm just like imploring students from the diaspora, get involved, get in there, take a class, or come for things like this. And you know, it would help you close the divide of, I don't really understand them, they don't really understand me. It will close that divide. And now I feel, I felt bad for all the stereotypes I had carried in my head, about all the presumptions I had made. You know, I felt really, it was really life-changing for me, you know. So now I feel like I'm more aware, I'm more engaged, you know, about this issue. So that's my call to students from diaspora, from Africa, from the Caribbean, from Haiti, anywhere. Take a class in American history. It would help you understand.
You know, the other thing that's kind of encouraging is, who's this guy who wrote, I'll be gone till September, I'll be gone till November?
Blackness.
Yeah. In spite of all of our intellectual discussions, there's also this informal meshing that's really interesting, like with Wycliffe. And I'm thinking about, for some of you may know some of the purple people I'm talking about, Sid the Kid, Tyler the Creator, and Earl, whose father I knew as a poet in New York, Willie Hositsile. So there are these informal things happening and borrowings between, and even a debate and a discussion among young people that we're not as privy to about these different interesting matches that are happening. There's a young Somali musician in New York, I can't think of his name, Azza, his sister was in my class. There's a lot of in film and music, there's a lot of marriage of people from different diaspora and African positions, I think, that we can't see. So
yeah, what I really appreciate about what you just shared is that I feel an enormous amount of hope for us as Black people, and I think as an African American, Black immigrants to this country give me a lot of hope for us as a Black community, because I think that our entire community, I think it expands our liberation movement and our work as Black people, and I think that I think when Black people are really connecting across all these differences, it's a really beautiful, powerful thing, and I think that has huge implications for just for our future as Black communities in the U.S. I'm like really, I'm like excited, I'm jazzed, I'm curious to connect with people. I don't mind saying, I really don't know, or I have a question, or I've never been there, so you're going to have to talk to me about, what's going on. And I feel like if we can encourage that mutual curiosity about each other in the spirit of Black love, I feel like the transformation is limitless and what it can have for our world. And so I'm just really, really heartened and committed to it. And I just love Black people. I don't really care where you're from. I love Black people. And so...
I want to say, too, that especially to the younger people who are either kids of recent immigrants or immigrants themselves, you may not even see the impact that you're making just by your presence. And I'll just give you a small example. Not too long ago, in this country, whites thought they knew Black people. So much so that we had a comedian, Flip Wilson, who used to say, "You don't know me." But now whites can't make those assumptions. When they walk down the street, they don't know who you are. They don't know if your relatives were from South Carolina or South Africa. And that is good for white people. That's good for them. It's making white people think about diversity within race. And that, unfortunately, is new in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So just the presence of African immigrants puts people on notice.
I think it was a question, outstanding question.
Oh, really? Okay.
So,
Introduce yourself first.
I'm Jemadari Kamara. I'm on the faculty at UMass Boston, and I'm currently acting as chairman of the Africana Studies Department, and I'm director of the Center for African, Caribbean, and Community Development. And I'm the former treasurer of WARA, and I really would like to commend WARA for hosting this conversation. And I really appreciate the way in which you have generated this dialogue that I feel needs to be a continuous kind of conversation. And that this is one of those points in that conversation that I think can enrich us all. And particularly the multiple levels of intervention that you've discussed. Because in that engagement among us, the follow-up has to continue at multiple levels. And there are a couple of comments I'd like to make in relationship to that, because you spoke about this question of statelessness. This past week, Hillary Beckles was here.
Oh, wow.
Besides Wendy, anyone know Hillary Beckles? Anyone? Homework. Sorry. Everyone should know Sir Hillary Beckles. He is well-known historian from the Caribbean, he's from Barbados, currently the Chancellor of the University of the West Indies. Academic credentials. One of his most recent books is called Britain's Black Debt. So Hillary is now the chairperson of the CARICOM Commission that was set up in 2014 under the leadership of the prime ministers of the CARICOM countries, that has now established a commission on each of the Caribbean islands focused on the issue of reparations.
Wow.
In April of last year, the Caribbean Reparations Commission came to the United States and held a meeting in conjunction with the Institute of the Black World. And there has now been formed a National African American Reparations Commission. In November, there was an international conference held in the University of Edinburgh, where Sir Hillary spoke. And there were representatives from many of the European countries, France, Germany, Netherlands, all over Europe, who came to this meeting to discuss this issue of reparations. And Obama or no Obama, people of African descent here are powerless as it comes to the control of the state. And it is not until those who control state power, who are of African descent, have now raised the issue of reparations or the process of repairing that which occurred through the Ma'afa, that this is now being raised to a global level. Our relationship as a collective people to power is fundamentally different. When in some of my classes, several of my students are really pleased to see who are out here now and working with the Africans in Boston and so forth, and I'm glad to see you here as well. But in several of the classes, I begin the class, they know that, first day of class. We introduce ourselves. Everyone introduces themselves. After you give me your name, rank, and serial number, I want you to share with us what is your race, your ethnicity, and your citizenship. Now, these are issues you touched upon in various ways, but it is a conversation, first of all, that the vast majority of us don't have with ourselves, much less to share that with someone else or even think about ourselves in that relationship. Several of the most interesting comments have come from, there was one brother from Haiti and actually another brother from Nigeria. A brother from Nigeria said, you know, I am Igbo by ethnicity. I'm a Nigerian citizen and I became black when I came here. And there was another student, I think she was from Bosnia, Slovenia, who said, I am Slavic by ethnicity, from Bosnia. I became white when I came to the U.S. And it is the nature of the construct that we find ourselves in here that raises a certain set of contradictions that is unique and different, particularly from those who may be from Brazil or Panama or Cuba
Or Morocco.
or Nigeria. It's different. The sets of contradictions. And so when one comes here, one is placed into a construct in which there are different sets of primary or secondary contradictions, and we don't perceive of it that way. And so there's this disjuncture. You spoke about this issue of class, brother. I think that's very important, the class relationships. And in the conversation, the complexity of our responses must also engage the complexity of those issues that we're dealing with in a continuous way. I would hope that we just had a brief conversation that perhaps following this, there can be a way, maybe in the fall, that we begin to come together across our institutions and our academic departments with folks from the community and AIB and the Boston Pan-African Forum in other ways to continue this, because it has to be a continuous process and engagement. We have to engage, as Sister talked about, the content of curriculum in school, but also out of school, after school, Saturday, to open up this kind of dialogue and engagement with ourselves, with our brothers and sisters, to make the bridges that are necessary to build for our future. So I really commend you for this. I'm gonna
Thank you.
I think Jemadari pretty much said it all. I don't know if anybody wants to react to what he just said. If anybody had any kind of light bulb moments or
Somebody back
aha
there.
moments.
Also back there
Oh, yeah.
afterwards.
I came in this country with a lot of misunderstanding of Black America. I had a personal beef with a scholar at Fisk. He went to travel to Africa, Tanzania, had a bad experience with some of the villagers and came back. And it's the way he portrayed Africa really bothered me, because just because you have a bad experience with one country, you don't have to collapse everyone in the same. So my question is, how do we have a multi-generational dialogue to bridge the gap? Because when you're talking about African diaspora, you got to keep in mind the Black community in France and Paris. I got families over there. It's a conversation that we have. I have a lot of people connected back in the continent because I was blessed to grow up between Gabon and Congo, interact with different Africans. So it's very complex. It's not quite easy because Africa is 54 countries, 3,000, and the multi-generational dialogue is this: what's the recipe? What's the key here? I know we have to keep the dialogue going. And when I advocate on a conflict in the Congo, people look at me like I'm crazy, but when I educate, it makes sense, because I'm an activist. So what's the recipe to have a multi-generational dialogue? Keep in mind that the cultural differences is there, the language barrier is there, When I came here, I told them, listen, they told me, oh, when you go to America, say what's up to Janet Jackson, because hip-hop is how we view Black America. But so much misunderstanding on both sides, and it's deep. But the next generation of young people, it's just that there's this gap that it's tough to address,
Excuse me. He's not, no, see, I'm not going to let him off. He's not being fair, see, because he didn't come with everything. Afro Blue, come on, why don't you share with them what you do and how you've taken some steps to do that? And you want to share something with us?
We'll have...
Come on.
Anybody else, is it okay if other people have things that they're doing that you want us to know about? Please share also.
And there was somebody over here that would like to speak later.
Okay, great.
Okay, real quick. The only thing we wanted for our country was the right to a decent existence, to independence without restriction, to dignity without hypocrisy. The day will come when history will have its say. Patrice Lumumba. Where is Operation Congolese Freedom? Where Uganda soldiers have engaged in gang rape and hauling down naked hundreds of Congolese women to slice off their breasts and sex organs. Where is Operation Congolese Freedom? When Eastern Congo, Bunia, over 200 bodies were discovered on the street, mainly women and children, and some were decapitated, and others with their hearts, livers, and lungs ripped out. And the massacre becomes a way of living, where women have lost their arms and legs. So welcome to the Congo, known as the rape capital of the world, where over thousands of women were raped every month, all because a cell phone, a laptop, a iPhone. You see these cell phones contain mineral that we call coltan, C-O-L-T-A-N, coltan, C-O-L-T-A-N, coltan, a mineral that help produce electronic devices in the Western U.S., and 80% of coltan come from the Congo, where children have been kidnapped and told to dig for coltan in Congolese mines with their fingers. So foreign investors can exploit them illegally with the help of African rebels. And these rebels in return use rape and violence as a weapon of war. And as a result, over 6 million of Congolese have died during the Congolese war. But since you barely get to hear this on the news, welcome to the Congo, Africa's second largest country, one of the most mineral-rich and overlooked country in humanity. My beloved origin, I was blessed to escape the war at 16, but the war never took the Congo out of me. So to my friend, when I crack jokes about Congo that, Congo this, Congo that, it's because underneath the laughter I cope with agony of pain. Imagining Congolese women taking showers in rivers of blood and asking folks around the world, does your cell phone have blood on it? Does your laptop have blood on it? Because rape have a Congolese woman face, so you and I can enjoy texting and play Candy Crush in the Western U.S. So how does that cell phone connected to the genocide in the Congo? Should we call Verizon, T-Mobile, Apple? Nah, but I decided that I'm going to refuse to hate. Because I can't afford to hate. Because my soul has evolved against all type of hate. Because you can never fight hate with hate. But as the blind lead the blind in this modern days, where human beings fight violence with violence or confusion with division, I decided to fight hate with love. Call me insane, but you see, love indeed defeat hate. So Mother Africa, I have no choice but to love you and to love. So God can be the anthem of my soul. Long live the Congo. Long live Patrice Lumumba. Nelson Mandela, Tata Madiba. Long live Africa.
There was somebody back here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, my joints just start hurting. The older you get, it just start hurting. But that was beautiful. I wanted to ask, because I know we were talking about like the older generation and like my generation. I go to UMass Boston. Hopefully I'll be finishing soon, and I have 2 daughters. And what I heard you mention, I heard you mention about a lot about like African American and Africans, how we view each other. And as a Ghanaian American, I kind of know how that is, because growing up in the 80s and 90s, I grew up in Detroit and then the South. So I had that experience of course, racism, but also the Afrocentric viewpoint. And I know you mentioned about like ideology. You give a child ideology, but like if you got to give them something sustainable. So let them know like they're beautiful. Growing up, I grew up in like the generation where like children should be seen and not heard. And if you were heard, you were beaten. And so therefore, you were given this African perspective. Generally, it was like mysticized. Like you go to Africa, all your problems go away. My mother taught me different, but still, you see what you see. Then I had to deal with what was on TV. Africans, of course, we were all ashy, violent, living in the bush backwards. And so growing up, I did not like myself as a child. So now that I have daughters, I'm trying to find out various ways of art and through various avenues of how can I let them know that they're beautiful and they're black as young black women, because when I try to get my daughter into like various Ghanaian things or the African things, and she does good, like she likes Dr. Stubbins or whatnot, but then like she'll see something like on TV like that show Disney Snow, or something, Frozen. There we go. And then she'll see that, and then later on she'll be like, "I'm ugly, Daddy." You know, I'm like, why you said it? Because my hair is nappy, I'm brown. I'm like, and it's just like, so how do we like really deal with that? Because if my daughter grows up, and if people like me, like us, don't do something as African Americans and Africans, they're going to go into a world where we're going to be hating each other. Like, oh, Black Americans are trifling and lazy, from what I hear on one side, and then on the other side, Africans are just violent and crazy and backwards. And, you know, and if they grew up with the white power structure that says, you know, your beautiful standard is blonde hair, blue eyes, you know, and a slim figure, it's like, it's like a battle. So I just want to know, like, for children, because if we don't start with our children, everything else we're trying to do won't mean anything, because they'll just go up to hate themselves.
I would like to chime in first and say that I think we need to create more social networks, clubs, social clubs. I know that a lot of immigrants create social clubs according to their nationality or their ethnicity. But it might also be time for us to create clubs across ethnicities of people of like mind. You know, for years, African Americans created all kinds of clubs just for that reason, so that they could have little parties for their daughters and say, "You look beautiful," or have a party that we cook good food for everybody. Those things those kinds of institutions have to be consciously created and maintained. So wherever you live, if you can find people who are of different African descent backgrounds, because that will automatically help your children see that those different kinds of people can be respected. I think that might be one of the things that would help. And then, of course, whenever you can travel, or if you have people from different places, because sometimes if you have a child if you have a third place, it makes it easier. I'll just say, one of my children will say, "You don't have to tell me that I was born in Senegal. I know already. I was born in Senegal." But there's so many things that he doesn't know because he's growing up here now. So what is good sometimes is to put him with a Malian or a Ghanaian so he doesn't feel the challenge of showing how much he knows about Senegal, but still getting reinforced. Do you see what I mean? So sometimes you can do things like that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that too. And I don't have kids. I have nieces and nephews, but I'm not raising kids as a parent. So, but I know that as a Black woman, growing up, not liking what I look like either, and feeling like I was ugly and all this other stuff. And there is lots of efforts right now to make sure that we get books with written, with characters, beautiful Black characters written for kids, and there's a movement.
Illustration is very important. I think as a young kids, when we were younger,
yeah.
I always thought he was Black when I was young, so but then as I started to build, I have a son, and so like I show him books like Jonathan and his mom and Kevin and his dad.
Yeah.
It's beautiful illustrations of Black children, Black people,
Yes.
things like that, and that really helps.
That is important. So one thing we can do in these informal social networks is read those books together.
That's right, to children.
And parents get together and read books with their kids and then talk about those stories. So these are the kind of informal institutions that we can create for ourselves. We don't need large institutions. We can do that for ourselves.
Can I intervene here for a moment? I know this is about Africans and the diaspora, but it's really important that white children read those books too.
Yes.
White children need to see, they need to see beautiful Black children. They need to see Black leaders in their schools. They need to see Black teachers. They need to, otherwise, the power structure that is pushing is not going to be able to release until our children can see this world too.
You're doing
in the
well.
spirit of Kuumba, I have a 14-year-old who is very disconnected from what it means to be African. In some ways, as he should be. He was born here, right? It's a very confusing dichotomy. But I've started making earrings with him. So the symbol is like making sure he's listening to me, you know? And his job is to just twist the metal. He's got the tools. So he's doing the craftsmanship while I am creating these lovely art rings. Each one is unique. And I've told him that he can get $5 off of each sale. So there's a little incentive for him. But during the course of this Kuumba session, we're getting down to some things that he's just not learning, and the messages that are being, providing some psychic wounds for him, basically unteaching, and also creating in the true African style. We made things beautiful. We made things out of what was in the house. So it's not always me going out to the store getting things. It's like, those beads are ugly, let's cut them apart and upcycle them. So that's a small way that I'm trying to teach my son to be proud of who he is, despite the messages that he receives on a daily basis that his life has no value.
Yeah. I think we really need to have some kind of age group thing going.
Age group thing.
For boys and girls.
Well, and then we also need the intergenerational. It seems like that's what people are asking for, is how do we create intergenerational networks?
So,
and this brother in the back also had his hand up.
So I'm Nigerian. I work for NigerianInvestors.com. And another thing that I've realized that actually helps with the intergenerational, differences is the business opportunities. Like, a lot of people, even African Americans, don't realize, like, if you go on Forbes, the wealthiest black person is Aliko Dangote, who's in Nigeria. And those things help them, like, just, accumulate a desire to learn more. I mean, just on the business standpoint, as like, yes, you can make it very far in America, but still, I don't know if it's coincidence or what, but the wealthiest black person's still in Africa. So.
Okay, so one more reaction?
Yeah, so this is interesting. I am graduating from Northeastern University. It's really sad because I had to literally essentially start over when I got here.
Okay.
So,
you mean with your educational?
Yeah, but
okay.
It's good, I guess. No experience is the worst.
Okay.
And I've had the pleasure of actually, because I was at UMass before, and I learned directly from Professor Kamara, amazing, and all the other rebels at that department. And also I'm a member of the Africans in Boston. I think that I've been to a whole lot of, dialogues and exchange like this, and, great ideas are exchanged, and then after the fact, it's like everything disappears into thin air. And one of the things that I will be trying to, probably take on as a project is this concept of intergenerational dialogue.
Great.
Because what and he emphasized that. I mean, I once took a course with one of my professors, Professor Noruddin, and he was really, you could see the frustration and the fact that he is a resource, and an amazing resource indeed. And you have these tons of black people and they don't even talk to him. So, and that's the thing. I think that it will be really interesting to take up as a project to work on, trying to create a platform for this kind of intergenerational dialogue, where the elders are connected to the kids, because within Nigerian history and African history, I like to talk about the little place I come from, because I'm not an expert in Africa. There is like, a continuous form of mentorship that goes on. So when kids grow up, they are connected to the past, as far as you can possibly remember. And I think that during the time of the civil rights movement and all, before because the advantages of affirmative action it's been amazing, but then part of the disadvantage is disconnect that you mentioned. Now, how do we begin to rectify that? So I look forward to working on something like this, and I putting this out there if there's anyone in there
Great. Thank you for
that
taking
want
action.
to,
Thank you
so that would be
great. Any one of us can take action on any of the strategies. And I hope, it's like I believe that the elders, as someone who's also aging, is the elders learn too. It's not just the younger generation that's learning. There's like a transfer up of knowledge and back of knowledge. Everybody's learning. Everybody's learning. So thank you for tonight. Hope you guys connect. And anybody else?
Just as a resource, my name is Vincent Licenziato, and I've created something that is uniquely Boston. It will be hopefully sponsored by the Howard Thurman Center soon. There's not enough to go around to everyone, but there is a website, and it's called emancipationtrail.org. And it creates dialogue about current events. It also teaches history about African American history. More importantly, though, it's America's story that the African American community exemplifies, which is a struggle for freedom, equality, and justice. So I do not teach African American history, I teach American history. So if you go to emancipationtrail.org, you'll find a draft of it, but hopefully it will soon be improved. But Ms. Kennedy has a number of copies, and I have a few here if somebody wants them.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
He gets his, but he gets one because he's doing
All right.
the dialogue.
I think that we've passed the time that we promised you we would close, but it's been a very vibrant discussion, and I really want to thank Trina and Wendy for coming and sharing all this. It's, as Trina said, I'm sure it's not easy, and I want to acknowledge that. It's very, very thought-provoking, and hopefully it will have various results in actions that people will take. I want to thank the Howard Thurman Center again for hosting us and for giving us this very agreeable space to meet in. And again, to thank our co-sponsors, the African American Studies Program, the African Studies Center, Africans in Boston. Leonard, are you still here?
Yes. Beautiful.
He's the representative. An African Students Organization. And finally, last but not least, to thank the Boston Cultural Council for supporting this kind of dialogue.
Great. Wonderful.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got some stuff up here to read.
Here's some free book bar from
Let's see how that went. Oh my God, Peter. Thank you.
Oh, should I ask?